Let me introduce Adrian. So Adrian is the Senior GovLab Fellow and with a long-standing history and experience in the open data space. And let me give the floor to Adrian, who's going to be the moderator of the next panel. And so let me try to get the next panel presented here. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and for giving us the task of solving all the problems. Just a high order to get things going, but also just want to echo your thanks to the panel that we just heard from. I was furiously taking notes, so many interesting ideas, suggestions, questions, and really appreciated all of the magic wand insights and ideas as well. And so with that, it's my pleasure to welcome the Open Data Policy Summit's Public Sector panel. So today we're going to be building off of themes that have been discussed from the beginning of today's event, but looking for perspectives from the public sector. So we'll be kind of looking at, within the context of the rise of the democratization and access of AI, notably thanks to generative AI, concerns about shadow effects on the broader data ecosystem, notably the open data ecosystem, and looking to explore and address questions around what the relationship between these factors are, what role public policy might be able to play in guaranteeing that data remains open, and also the responsibilities of public sector actors, government, philanthropy, which were already mentioned a lot in the private sector panel we just heard from. Also nonprofits, what is the role and responsibility that they have both today and in the coming months and years? And so with that, it's my pleasure to really introduce our esteemed panelists that are joining us here today. So we have, and feel free to take yourself onto video, all of you. So we have Nati Karfi, the Executive Director of the Open Data Charter, Federico Sighi, the Vice Director General of the National Statistics Institute of Uruguay, and Yuri Pilar, Legal and Policy Officer in Data Policy and Innovation Unit for the European Commission. And I want to check and see if Philip has joined us yet as well. It looks like he's not here yet. So we'll go ahead and give him a few moments. But we are looking to have Philip Figo, Executive Director for Africa at Thunderbird School of Global Management, joining us as well. And so with that, the structure for this panel will follow very similarly to what Stefan just led. I'm going to be starting out with some moderator's privilege, asking a specific question to each panelist before opening up to broader discussion within this group, and then we'll have time to take questions from the audience. So please do continue to engage and put your questions in the Q&A section here within the webinar format. I and the team are going to be keeping an eye on that, and definitely very, very eager to get your thoughts and continued engagement. And so with that, I'm eager to turn it over to you first, Nati, and have a few questions. You worked on open data and open government for over a decade and have seen the movement change and evolve so much. How do you understand the role of AI in shaping the open data movement? What do you see as the major opportunities and obstacles that it presents?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for the invitation, Stefan, Adrian. I'm right now in a conference, so I'm sorry if there's a little bit of background noise. I'm hidden in a corner. Aside from that, I'm glad to be here and to go into the question that you've asked. I would first start with kind of going around the question with how has the open data movement shaped the role of AI, or what is the added value of open data to AI? And I was just hearing the panel before us and talking about the high value datasets initiative of the European Union, and how if there is, and I guess this started with a question, are there high value datasets for specific areas of artificial intelligence. I'm right now participating in the International Anti-Corruption Conference, and I've just seen really interesting use of open data and AI as a way of advocating and actually fighting corruption, if you will, and how this technology is actually allowing civil society organizations and journalists to be able to navigate high value data sets, big data sets that would take months for people to kind of go into and try to understand what's going on, and kind of building up red flag systems based on open data and AI. So there's specific uses that I'm actually seeing here, but I've also seen some cases, which is always good to know, on where actually the actual system told us, like the developers, that this was as far as they could go as far as projections. So for example, Gemini actually told a civil society organization that the projections that they were trying to make around public procurement deviations could go as far as certain point. And then after that, it would break. So the AI actually itself talked about its own limitations. So there's a lot of developments that we still need to find out. Working on high value data sets and understanding how open data can actually help in the AI development. One of the things that we've been doing from the Open Data Charter perspective is trying to understand how we can add value to the transparency component of the discussion around democratizing AI. So is there a way in which governments that are developing different AI systems can actually be transparent about the data sets that are being fed into a specific AI system? We've seen cases where certain governments are actually publishing a data set of the data sets that are being used on different developments of AI, which is a super interesting idea. I'm a little bit concerned about the kind of everyday citizens' capacity to actually understand the impact of those data sets being fed into AI, because we've seen that being transparent about the AI developments doesn't just need the data. You know, we need to understand how the algorithms are being developed and potential biases, but it's a good start. And then on the other hand, a research project that we will soon be publishing actually speaks about this idea of, sorry, I'm getting a lag there, but I think I'm done. This idea of high value data sets and how artificial intelligence systems that are being developed are neither artificial nor intelligent, and they still need very much a human component of checkups and data mining, if you will, so that the data sets have the quality of data that are actually needed to be fed into the systems that are being developed. So from the open data perspective, from our advocating work, I would say that we can actually try to promote better quality data sets to be opened by governments so that they can be fed into these AI systems. And there's also, it's important not just for transparency, but also for representation. The most of the high value data sets with good quality in publication actually come from the global north. And if we want to democratize AI systems and the results that come of those algorithms, we need the data that actually represents us living in the global south. But for that, we need to have the data. So I think from civil society perspective and from government perspective also, as far as investment, as far as advocacy, there's something there to be done. We will take the baton of the advocacy a bit, but then governments need to also invest in getting that data out there with high quality, so that AI systems are more representative of the population in which they are trying to work with.
Thank you so much for that, Nati. So interesting. And there's one component of what you shared around kind of this this transparency component and how it's still a bit of an open question around AI. Like what role do you see open data playing in that? Like is open data actually the toolkit, the toolbox, the solution to making AI more transparent? Are there lessons learned that we can use in the development of AI products from open data? I'm just curious what relationships you might be seeing there.
And thanks for the question. I wish I had like a overall answer to that, but I think we are, as AI is developing, we are seeing different use cases and different aspects of it. And as I said, one of the aspects of democratizing AI has to do with transparency. As understanding that the backbone of every AI development, whatever type of development it is data. I think the open data community that has been advocating for transparency, for openness for over 15 years has a role to play. We now understand after these 15 or more years how government works, how data is created, also understand the challenges that government meet, because we all know that there's some cases where there's no connection between ministries and the legacy systems that they work on as far as data creation goes. But I do think that our knowledge, our collective knowledge as a community after 15 years has something to add, has added value to this conversation. It's a rather simplistic answer to say that if we publish the data sets, like a data set with the data sets that are being fed into public AI developments, we would be transparent, because the complexity of the AI systems actually needs more than just understanding which data is being fed into that. There's a lot of conversations around regulations on AI. Of course, the European Union has just released one. The United Nations has a high-level panel discussing on this. The important thing is that we frame those conversations around AI governance and data governance, because we are actually talking about data when we're talking about AI, around human rights, understanding the right to access information, but most importantly, in this case, the right for privacy. And when we're talking about development of AI within government, we are talking about one of the institutions that holds most of the data, the personal data that there is. So it's very important that these regulations have human rights in the center. Just last week, the Global Responsible AI Index was launched, and unfortunately, the ranking is not that good. And one of the main takeaways that, at least for me, was kind of surprising was that even those countries that have AI regulations, does not entail that transparency and a human's right in the center. Data governance is in place. So there's still a lot of missing points in those regulations. And one of the other important takeaways is that most of the countries, when they're trying to regulate on AI and on data, take a look at what international forums are actually advising. So UNESCO, ITU, IGF, the Digital Compact, the discussions around the Global Digital Compact, all have impact in what the governments are actually going to be regulated on. So this is a call out for civil society out there in this conference. We know where governments are looking, so we should be participating and advocating for this human-centered kind of data regulation and AI regulation in those forums, because then what comes out of that is what's going to impact the national regulations on data governance and on AI.
Thank you so much, Nati. You said you didn't have solutions for that question, but I feel like there were quite a few listed there actually. So appreciate you sharing that, and also some of the insights and examples that you're seeing at the conference that you're at. Fantastic. And there are a lot of points there that I hope to come back to in a few minutes, but would like to turn next to Jiri. Really thrilled to have you here with us today, and also building off of some of Nati's points around regulation and what we're seeing in the European Union. We've seen the European Union really emerge as a leader in policymaking, both on AI and data, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act. Could you talk to us a little bit about these developments and the principles and values that have informed Europe's approach thus far? What's allowed Europe really to sustain its momentum in these areas from your perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you for the invitation to this event. We often speak with people from around Europe, from the public sector, from the private sector users, but today is a great opportunity to also hear the other parts of the world. Like Adrienne said, I'm working at the European Commission, at the department that prepares data regulations or data policies for the 27 countries that make up the European Union. And what we are doing now, we are following a data strategy for Europe that we prepared some 4 years ago. And little by little, we put it in place in the form of regulations, policy actions, but also funding of some initiatives. At the very beginning, there was open data, really, or at least something that aspired to be open data, that tried to open the data from the public sector that was already paid by the citizens, and was either sitting there without use or was sometimes used by the public sector itself to provide some commercial services and selling them on the market. So the original idea behind this first set of rules was to make sure that anyone can compete on the market that reuses public sector information. And now, that was the very beginning, some 20 years ago, and these rules are still in place, and it's still a work in progress, even after all this time. The main rule is that if something is accessible, if something is public, then it can be also reused by anyone, as long as you respect intellectual property rights, data protection, confidentiality, sometimes public security as well. So this is the ground rule, but it was not enough. Firstly, member states of Europe were coming to us, there's just simply too much data. So we would like to know where to start from, where to focus, where to invest our limited resources. And secondly, we realized it's probably good if you want to promote reuse. We need to make sure that the data is really reusable under very friendly conditions. So this is how the whole idea of high-value data sets came about. It's just a name, high value. It doesn't mean there's always monetary value. It can be a societal value, but the data must be interesting, must be reusable by European SMEs preferably, and must be possible to combine them with some other data sets to create some interesting new services. So that's why we chose these data sets for member states to focus on. They come from 6 distinct categories, so that you cover a really a good part of human life and activities. So it's firstly geospatial data sets, data from Earth observation and environment, from meteorology, statistics, some data on companies, and data on mobility. So all usual suspects, you would say, but we want to go beyond this in the next couple of years, because there's clearly some very interesting data that could be on the list as well. For example, in Europe, what is very important is language data, because we have so many languages that we need to translate all the time, documents and our communications. So over the years, we accumulated really huge databases of translated documents, and they can be very useful for training AI, translation services, natural language processing. Actually, they are doing it already. You could observe, or at least we could observe, that the quality of translations has made a huge leap in the last 2 years. So all these data sets that I just mentioned, they need to be made available for free. That's quite obvious if they are to be reused under friendly conditions. But not only that, they also need to be accessible via APIs and in bulk and in machine readable form, so that reusers can really start doing something with them very quickly. And we also developed from the fact that a lot of these categories of data, like statistics or geospatial or environmental, they have been streamlined since a long time in Europe, so that member states come together and they try to do things similarly in their respective countries and try to make the data interoperable. So, for example, map data have gone quite far in this respect already throughout Europe. And on top of that, we came up with metadata standards so that you can actually find the high-value data sets when you look for them through metadata, so that you find information on the APIs in the metadata, on licenses, on bulk download. So this all will help, firstly, users to find the data, and secondly, to member states to show us that they have done their homework. We also created a couple of code lists for that, so that member states denote the data sets in a uniform way. And what happens afterwards with the data sets once they are made open by member states? There is also a European data portal that harvests them and displays them as coming from different parts of Europe in one place. So this is already coming up slowly, because this regulation on high-value datasets started applying only about a week ago. But we can already see some high-value datasets coming up on the European data portal as they are slowly harvested. Now, this was open data, but the Commission realized there's not only data that is open that is interesting. Some public sector data simply cannot be made open. You can imagine there's some private information, commercial secrets, trade secrets, or it could be data that are sensitive from the public order perspective. But still, we wanted to make it possible to reuse them, to have some limited access to them, and get some insights from such data, for example, for research on health data. So now it is possible in Europe to come to the public sector body, and if you are refused your access to some data, saying that it's sensitive, it cannot be made open, you can ask to have a restricted access under very specific conditions, sometimes within the premises of the public sector body or in some secret environment, and still try to have a look at the data, of course, without publishing it, but trying to get the insight from it. So that's public sector data, but we are also moving beyond the data generated by the public sector. It can be very interesting also if we as a citizens, or sometimes can be companies, institutions, could give our data for the general interest, for some public good. So now we have also, we call it data altruism organizations, because there should be really this altruistic goal behind. And these organizations have the right to collect the data for public good from citizens and companies. But they, of course, have to abide by strict rules, ethical and legal, to make sure that data is really used only for the public good that it was donated for. And lastly, we also have intermediation services in place. So those are companies coming up. There are not so many yet, but it's been in place only since half a year. Companies who try to link those who have data and those who need the data. And again, there are some clear rules for them that they should not take advantage of the data. They are just the intermediator. So they should not use the data for their own benefit or for their own profit, but they should try to make the link between the parties who share the data. And lastly, the last piece of legislation is the Data Act, as you mentioned, Adrian. And here we are really going towards B2B relationships because there's a lot of industrial data in companies or in our homes that present a huge potential that is not realized because it's not clear who has access to the data, who can get some value from it. And sometimes the rules are really fragmented. So when you look at all of our IT devices that we have at home or that companies have on their premises, in their manufacturing units, there's a lot of IoT data that is sometimes locked in for use by the provider of the device. And the Data Act comes with rules that make it possible either for the holder of the device to use the data by herself, but it can be sometimes very, very difficult, very complicated. So there are also possibilities to make the data available for a third party that can find something interesting to do with the data. And then, of course, for this, we have all kinds of rules in place how to make sure that such transfer of data is fair, that there are not so unfair practices dealing with this kind of data. So just to conclude this introductory part, I would say it's true that there are some signs of winter. You could see that some categories of data are getting less open than used to be. In Europe, it concerns, for example, company register data, very detailed data on companies, on their directors, or on beneficial owners. They tend to be less widely accessible. It will be more difficult now, or it is getting more difficult to get a bulk download of these kind of databases. But with other new possibilities to have a look and get some insight from the data, we are trying still to preserve the possibility to get some valuable benefits from the data, because the European Union is looking more at the economical side of things. We cannot prescribe member states how transparent they should be toward their citizens. It's still something that is their prerogatives. And secondly, we are trying to focus more on the data that can be made open, like, for example, the high-value data sets. And lastly, we are shifting or expanding our interest to data that is not generated by the public sector, like I mentioned, IoT data or the data donated by citizens and companies. So to conclude, there is some signs of winter, but I think that at the same time, many parts of the data infrastructure and economy are rather showing the signs of spring coming.
Well, thank you so much for that data weather forecast, and also for the overview of kind of taking policy to implementation in a lot of ways, and just kind of some of those very important details of how to make that happen. I'm curious, just because so much of the discussion so far today has also touched on kind of referencing the private sector panel in particular. I think, you know, Chris mentioned if she could wave a magic wand, she would actually instill more data privacy regulation 30 years ago. So I'm curious, kind of, and there's other parts of the world that are taking a bit of a piecemeal approach, kind of what we're seeing in the United States. What do you think has really enabled Europe to get to where it is right now from a regulatory perspective? Would you say it's primarily been constituent demand driven, or and if you're not sure, that's fine too, but I'm just curious to get your perspective on that, kind of from a global policy perspective.
Oh, yes, that's a very good question, because there's an elephant in the room that I did not mention previously, and it's the General Data Protection Regulation that looms like a shadow over all the regulation, all the legislation I have mentioned, because it always needs to be taken into account. Anytime you asking somebody for data, or anytime you imposing some data sharing obligation or possibility, in the next sentence you are saying, but make sure that you are respecting the privacy rights, or as we say in Europe, personal data protection. So this regulation applies at any moment to any identifiable data that can lead to a concrete person. So you have to bear it in mind the whole time. And this is why, for example, the data from company registers are getting a bit less reusable than they used to, because there is ever-growing awareness that this data is really something where you need to be very careful if you hold it and if you are a data processor. The same goes for the data on beneficial owners of companies. That's why also the list of high-value data sets, when you look at it, meteorology, statistics, geospatial, mostly data that where you can be safely sure that there are no personal data behind it. So this is something that's quite important in Europe. It's one of the fundamental rights written in our charter. And even though it was not previously part of the legislation that is directly binding in member states since at least 25 years have been going towards a joint application of these rules. So there is no way you can go around it. Another aspect is data transfer to third countries. That is now coming into focus as well. It has been solved already for personal data. You might have heard your data on European citizens can be transferred only to countries that have similar level of protection of personal data. And now this philosophy is slowly appearing also to non-personal data, because member states would like to keep data important for their public security, sovereignty. They would like to keep it in the EU. So this is another big idea that has emerged over the last couple of years, that European data should only be transferred elsewhere if those other countries have a similar level of protection, for example, for intellectual property or for trade secrets.
All right, thank you so much for that, Yuri. And just kind of the reminder of GDPR, you mentioned an elephant in the room, but maybe a catalyst for a lot of like what we're seeing unfold. So greatly appreciate the perspective, and know that we'll be coming back to you for some more insights and thoughts. And would love to turn it over to Philip now. Philip, if you're able to turn on your camera, that would be lovely. I know that you had it on a moment ago. Hello, great to see you. And we have so many questions for you. I'll try to keep it tight, because I know we want to get to Federico as well, and open this up for a more broader discussion. So Philip, the voices that have shaped the conversation on AI and data have come from primarily the global north, and not what we would call the global majority. This is something that Michael underscored a lot in the private sector panel that we just heard earlier. I'm curious if you can talk about how these power imbalances really affect global policymaking, and what steps can be taken to ensure more inclusive and representative dialogue, and to the extent that there are insights that you can share from the UN advisory group on AI that you're a part of. Would be really curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Thanks so much for the question. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, so it's a loaded question. I think it is why Secretary General, in his wisdom, decided to appoint this group, right, of 39 nationalities from all UN regions, gender balanced, and from diverse perspectives on how AI can be governed for humanity, right? So just from that onset, it tells you that there was definitely a governance deficit in terms of how AI is inclusive. We know now for sure that AI is concentrated not just amongst a few countries, it's also concentrated amongst a few companies. And by that very nature, the concentration of those companies are in the global north. It also tells you that because those companies are in the global north, we've seen sort of the challenges around artificial intelligence and sort of the biases we've seen, the hallucinations we've seen, are very much because of that very one-sided thinking and concentration of AI and how it's built, or how that data is trained. When I talk about data, and I was listening to sort of Nati's sort of comments, is that you remember that part of the challenge around bias is that a lot of the data sets in the global majority are not digital, they are not on digital sources. And so if you're going to train artificial intelligence on data, you're definitely going to train them on digital sources. So it speaks to not necessarily, I think, for me, the issue of artificial intelligence, but to years of disinvestment on sort of data, especially representative data that is the global south. And so in the body, what we've been really thinking about is, one is that how do you fix this governance deficit? And if we're in the call, right, so it's EU, it's OECD, it's G7, it's G20, it's UK summit, it's the Hiroshima process, it's ASEAN. There's nothing in the global majority, right, around conversations around AI governance. And for me, that's a problem in itself, because it means regions are defining or defining the rules of how AI will be governed from their perspective, excluding the global south. And so the definite outcome of that is going to be either dispossession or dislocation of large populations. Also, we don't know what is the basis of the principles that this country or these regions or these bodies applying to govern artificial intelligence. We hardly hear human rights. We hardly hear the UN Charter. And so the deficit for me, and that is why I think this sort of global process is important, is we start to locate AI governance within the United Nations system, which is multi-stakeholder, multilateral, inclusive, and as all member states as a member. So it doesn't really matter whether you're AI rich or AI poor, but it's within the framework. And we've done this before with the global sustainable development goals. So I think that in the body for us, it was an imperative to start looking at the global coordination of AI to address the risks and uncertainties that it is creating, more or less, not because of only of the exclusion, but also because of what we're seeing has been the negative impact of artificial intelligence, and now increasingly also going into the autonomous lethal weapons in the military domain. We're actually seeing how sort of that challenge is escalating. And think about it, nobody in the global majority can afford, we're able to afford, we're able to use lethal autonomous weapons, but chances are that it will be used in the global majority. So how do we ensure that part of it is also to ensure that the global majority advocating for the ban of these types of weapons? The other piece, of course, is to ensure that the benefits of AI, including building it, are spread internationally. And then we need a global approach, because the impact is global, as much as it's concentrated amongst a few companies and a few countries. And so if you read our interim report, and we're coming out almost to the final report in the next couple of weeks, one is that we want AI to be governed inclusively and by all and for benefit of everybody. The second thing I think, of course, is that it has to be governed for public interest. This is why, if you look at a lot of the language we are pushing from the global majority, is we don't talk about responsible artificial intelligence, because it's responsible to who, right? It's about trustworthy artificial intelligence, because it's really about building public trust, and data is a conduit of trust. The third piece, of course, is, and which is where I'm going, that AI governance must be built in lockstep with data governance. It's just natural, right? Especially to promote data commons. And then the idea then that how we govern this must also recognize how the world is shaped, which means is universal, is networked, and rooted around multi-stakeholder collaboration. I think this is why private sector, civil society, academia, we're on the call, are important. I think finally also how we're thinking about this, it must be anchored in the UN Charter, international human rights, but also within agreed international commitments, especially the SDGs. Because when you talk about data, and I'm hearing around data protection, I'm hearing around some data being behind paywalls, is that the minute you start to frame it around rights, around inclusivity, around international commitments, then you begin to subject AI and data as its engine into some form of normative framework that then enshrines the values that we have as humans. So let me stop there.
Thank you for that, Philip. Greatly appreciate kind of the context setting of how this conversation within the UN advisory group on AI is taking place, the scale of it, the scope of it. Excited to learn more about the interim report, the report that's going to be coming out as well. And it's interesting for me also. I think both Nati and Yeri have both mentioned human rights. You've underscored human rights again, just as kind of where it's absent and where it needs to be present in these discussions. And also the intimate connection between data and AI, and the inability really to decouple these subjects as much as that might be part of what we seem to see with perhaps more of an absence of data discussions within an AI conversation as this AI wave continues to grow and build. I'm curious from your perspective, and not to really put you on the spot to see how much of an optimist or a pessimist you are, but just how much do you think there is a policy solution here? Like, is policy really going to help drive the solution, or is it going to be like a broader mix?
I think in our case, and I'm thinking about this, is I think it's, as you said, it's a raft of tools, right? It can't just be one. I think the first thing, and this is something you start to see in our sort of final report, is you see beyond policy, you need basic fluency around artificial intelligence, right? So because it seems like, interesting enough, that we are talking about different things. So we need almost a common language and a common understanding around artificial intelligence. When we talk about data commons, when we talk about open data, when we talk about data governance, it's interesting enough that because AI is as pervasive how we live, learn, work, communicate, that we need to almost have that common understanding. I think for me, if you don't have a common understanding, then think about setting points, right? So I think for me, that's sort of the first thing. The second thing is thinking about, we need sort of a common ground around policy, right? So how do we ensure that we have a multi-stakeholder conversation and collaboration so that we have common ground around understanding the principles? We may not necessarily agree on the specifics, but at least we need a common ground on principles, the do's and don'ts, what we need to do when AI has potential to cause a lot of harm, right? Or what can we do in terms of ensuring that AI delivers for humanity and public good? We at least need some common grounds around it. And I think that goes beyond policy. We also need to think about how do we ensure that the benefits are spread across. And I think that's beyond policy, because policy can only create guardrails, but we also need some consciousness around private sector, around industry, to begin to think around, as much as you want to do business, is how are we thinking that AI has become so integral now to global development, and that countries that are AI poor, and if you think the big three issues, if you think about data, if you think about talent, if you think about compute, not many countries in the global south can be able to afford this or access this. But if you think about it from a common goods, public goods, or common benefits approach, then it means it goes beyond policy. It's just common decency that then such capabilities are also placed in the hands of the global south. If you look at a lot of the models right now, whether it's Gemini or GPT, I mean, the cost of accessing just your prompt is $20. From the perspective of somebody in the global majority, I mean, I mean, I don't even have to go there, right? So we're talking about less than $1 a day here. We're talking about $20. Talks a model that will determine your sort of your future. So how do we even have a decent conversation around differentiated pricing model, understanding people's development pathways so that these benefits are spread across the ecosystem? Of course, the other piece, of course, is that we need a common purpose. That honestly, that AI really must deliver for development and for public good. And I think finally, it's very much around then how do we ensure that collaboration? And so for me, yes, it's policy, but also it's part of how do we ensure that there's sort of a deliberateness, whether it's financing or resourcing, whether it's investing in the infrastructure, whether it's investing in digital divide, whether it's investing in inclusivity which includes women and populations and margins that have always been left behind. Whether it's ensuring that we tackle the age of problems like energy, because you can't want to fund AI yet the continent of Africa is still a third, has only a third of the continent has electricity and energy. It's about devices. So I think it's very much around how do you have an action that, yes, we're in the next evolution of emerging technologies, but then there's a common action around not forgetting what are these foundations and pillars that ensures that a lot of these communities will just not necessarily be equalized, but also the engagement will be resilient as we go forward in this fast changing technological environment.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Philip. I'm going to put you down as an optimist. You can tell me if that if you disagree, but that's what I got from your response. And yeah, I really appreciated your point around ensuring deliberateness. Not kind of letting a Wild West unfold here, but really putting thought and principles and developing this common ground. So thank you for sharing that. And I'll turn it over to Federico next. Very eager to hear your thoughts on all of these discussion points. So I'm curious for you, Federico, statistical agencies of which you are a part produce data that's essential for understanding societal needs and where resources should be distributed to address those needs. What do you see as the obligations of statistical agencies in ensuring their data is used responsibly and effectively to promote the public good? And how are you seeing that change, if at all, given the advent of modern AI tools and products?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you very much, Stefan, and the GovLab team for the invitation to be panelist of this summit with distinguished panelists. Very honored and grateful. Thank you, Adrian, for the question. Let me start saying that the national statistical offices are fundamental pillars of the democracy. There is a noteworthy relationship between democracy and statistical capacity of national statistical systems. There is clear evidence of this. According to the Economist's Democracy Index and the World Bank's Statistical Capacity Indicator, countries with a higher index of democracy have a greater statistical development or capacity. Statistical capacity refers to a country's ability to collect, analyze, and use high-quality statistical data. It is essential for informed policy making, monitoring development progress, and ensuring transparency and accountability. For instance, let me mention a few key elements. First of all, accountability and transparency. Democratic governments are typically held to higher standards of accountability and transparency by their citizens and institutions. This creates a demand for reliable and accessible statistical data. Transparent practices in democracies often require robust statistical systems to provide accurate information to the public to verify government claims. Also, another important element is citizen participation. In democratic societies, citizens have more avenues to participate in governance and the decision-making processes. Reliable statistics empower citizens to make informed decisions and engage in policy debates. And public demand for data on issues such as health, education, and economic performance can drive improvements in statistical capacity. Other thing is institutional strength. Democracies usually have stronger institutions that support the development of robust statistical systems. independent statistical agencies are more likely to be established and maintained in democratic environments. Institutions in democracies are more likely to uphold principles of impartiality and independence, which are crucial for reliable data collection and analysis. Also, other important element is international support and cooperation. Democratic countries often have better access to international aid and technical support in building statistical capacity, including training, funding, and technology transfer. International organizations may prioritize partnerships with democratic nations, reinforcing their statistical systems and contributing to a positive feedback loop. And other key element is the policy formulation and implementation. Democracies tend to formulate policies based on empirical evidence, requiring a high level of statistical capacity to inform decision making. And effective policy implementation relies on accurate data to monitor outcomes and adjust strategies as needed, further emphasizing the importance of strong statistical systems. Going back to your question at the end, statistical offices have a critical role in ensuring that the data is used responsibly and effectively to promote the public good, especially in the age of artificial intelligence. Their obligation can be categorized into several key areas like data quality, and it is composed by accuracy, ensuring that the data collected, processed, and published is accurate, reliable, and valid. Timeliness, providing data in a timely manner to support decision-making processes. Completeness, collecting comprehensive data to provide a full picture of the studied phenomena. Consistency, maintaining consistency in data collection methods and definition to ensure comparability over time. Secondly, transparency and accessibility, having open data policies, making data available to the public in accessible format and means, ensuring that it can be used by researchers, policymakers, and the general public. At the NSI of Uruguay, we have a long tradition of publishing anonymized open data, open microdata in our own microdata portal, as in the country's open data catalog. Also documentation, providing clear and detailed metadata and documentation to enable users to understand the context, methodology, and limitations of the data. Also public engagement. So it is important things under the umbrella of transparency and accessibility, engaging with the public to explain the data and its implications and to gather feedback on data needs. Also, other key element is ethical and legal considerations. Of course, privacy and confidentiality. NSOs in general have a statistical law. So implementing robust measures to protect the privacy of individuals and ensure the confidentiality of sensitive information, I mean, statistical information in general. Informed consent, ensuring that data collection process respect the rights of individuals, including obtaining informed consent where appropriate. Also, bias and fairness. So actively working identify and mitigate biases in data collection and analysis, and mitigate risks that AI application using the data perpetuate or exacerbate existing inequalities. Also, other key element is promoting responsible use of data through guidelines and best practices. So developing and disseminating guidelines and best practices for the ethical and responsible use of statistical data, in particular in AI applications, and also training and capacity building, providing this kind of training and resources to data users on responsible data use, including understanding the potential biases and limitations of the data, mainly when we are talking about surveys, and they are based on a sample. So you have some kind of restrictions with the estimates that you can produce. So it is important to provide this kind of information and restriction or limitation to the users. Collaboration with researchers, partnering with academic and research institutions to ensure the data is used appropriately and to advance the state of knowledge. Other element is innovation and adaptation, leveraging technology, using advanced technology like AI to improve the collection, processing, and dissemination, and of course continue improvement. And finally, I would like to stress that the public good and societal impact. So providing equitable access to data, striving to provide equitable access to data, ensuring that all segments of society, including marginalized and underserved communities, can benefit from the data. So by meeting these obligations, statistical offices could help that their data is used in ways that promote transparency, accountability, and social good, while also harnessing the potential of AI to derive meaningful insight and drive progress. So it might help to minimize the risk of data misuse. The NSOs cannot participate in the public debate, but they can enrich it with reliable and quality data. NSOs cannot confront or warn about every use of data, but we can promote the correct use of official statistics, as I mentioned it, and create a critical mass of responsible and informed users and citizens by statistical literacy campaigns, creating attractive statistical contents, using different dissemination channels for different audiences, providing access to data for researchers in a secure environment, etc. As you know, nowadays there are more and more data sources available to link and re-identify individual cases. Therefore, NSOs face a big challenge when disseminating or providing access to data for research purposes. It is about achieving some kind of balance, disseminating useful data and anonymizing the data to preserve the information confidentiality. The more we anonymize, the less useful the data will be. The NSOs are implementing different mechanisms to provide access to data for the general public. our microdata web portal APIs, and for research purposes as well, such as laboratories or data enclaves. In these physical or virtual centers, researchers can access in a secure environment to process and analyze it. And the results are checked to prevent identifying individual cases or statistical disclosure control. And the researchers must publish their results. Their project, it is mandatory. It's a public good. So yes, part of this agreement to use this laboratory or data centers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Federico. I mean, it's a good reminder. When I was in New York City government, a recovering public servant now, there were so many assumptions that making data open was as simple as putting a spreadsheet online. And so much of what you shared is a great reminder of the foundations, the resources, the people, and the ecosystem necessary to making open data not only technically available, but accessible and easy to use, which was a point that Amra helped underscore in the previous panel. So thank you for the reminder of all of that. And I also felt your reflections on the relationships, the observed relationships, but also it sounds like some research between democracy and the existence of national statistics, kind of systems, organizations, teams. I found that to be quite interesting. And thank you for sharing a lot of the principles that kind of help maintain that and underscore those that work in those institutions. And so with that, I would love to ask maybe a question or two for everyone to chime in on. We also have quite the list of Q&A from our audience here, so I want to make sure that we're able to turn over to them sooner rather than later, as we're already coming up at the end of our hours together here. I will say some of these panelists, our panelists here, if you want to respond to any of the Q&A directly in the Q&A function, feel free to. I know that Yeri and Philip, there's some questions that are directed specifically to you. So if you would, and I think there's one now for Federico as well, if you'd like to go ahead and respond, feel free to do that in the chat. But otherwise, I'm curious, I think the question I'd love to ask of all of you is kind of coming back to a point that all of you mentioned is kind of the human component in all of this. And this is something that Chris also mentioned in the previous panel, is that kind of for all of the talk of artificial and intelligence and machines, there's still very much like a human component that's necessary in all of this, within data governance, within AI governance. And Nati, you had mentioned that, you know, there's a need for kind of the open data community that's been advocating and really made open data a reality for the last 15 years to really continue to push around what's necessary for this upcoming intersection between open data and AI, and as we move towards AI governance. You also made an interesting point around the need for literacy, and I feel like this touches on, you know, Federico, you just mentioned the need for good metadata, just kind of the accessibility of data itself. And so I'm curious to really hear from you all and of what you see the human capacity needs around kind of this continued, what might be seen as parallel, but hopefully also merging of open data and AI governance, whether that's in the form of data stewardship and the kind of needs there, or on the more constituent user level, and how might we help kind of the broader population better understand what's happening here, so that their voices may also be heard at the policymaking table. So there's a lot in there, but hopefully curious to hear some of your thoughts on that, and we'll let you all chime in as you see fit.
Okay, I guess I'll go. So yeah, well, there is indeed a lot of, I'd love to chime in there, but and focusing on your question and some of the questions that are actually on the chat room. I think one of the main things that we have to keep on doing, and I think it's a good lesson, because of course the open data community hasn't done everything perfectly. If not, we wouldn't be in this position of even asking if we're coming into a winter. But some of the good lessons go around collaboration. The open data community has always been very open. So as far as investments in the development of high quality data sets, open data sets from governments, I think there's a collaboration that needs to happen in a more deep and intense way of conversations between development, investment banks, the private sector, the public sector, civil society organizations, universities. Once again, I think that CSOs, from our perspective, we need to make a bigger fuss in this advocacy, in the discussions around the Global Digital Compact, where decisions for the future of the digital governance are being made. And so in the upcoming months, we will see investment commitments that are going to be happening. And we need to make sure that those commitments are met, and maybe advocate for openness as part of the accountability method for those investments. And then another thing that I think it would be interesting to talk just a little bit, because one of my other hats, and this I share a responsibility with Philip, is I'm part of the steering committee of the Open Government Partnership. And there's, for example, already multi-stakeholder forums that are created within the framework of the OGP that actually allow for these conversations through a methodology. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's already some spaces for collaboration that could be properly used. And there's actually an international call for a challenge on digital governance within the OGP framework that I think could be used. As far as data literacy, or how can we make citizens know about open data and AI, I know I might get some backlash here, but I'm still a fan of hackathons, of data innovation challenges. I do think there's still added value there. It's a place where community meets, where innovative ideas are born. And I come from Argentina. I'm part of the Latin American open data community. And I don't know if everybody knows, but we do have the regional open data conference, the most consistent one in the world. This year is going to be the 11th time that we meet in Brazil in December. I was there for the first one. We were 80 people, and now it's like 500 minimum. So I'm very proud to say that the community keeps on growing as the conversations on open data kind of dig deeper into thematic conversations. And AI, of course, is part of the themes that are now part of that conference. So those moments where the community meets, I think, are still very, very valuable.
Thank you for that, Nati. And I'm very glad to hear that the community you mentioned has, in a way, survived the virtual hiatus, which was COVID. So I think that's also, something that may not have been discussed much today, but also kind of what has the COVID effect been on the data winter signs that we might be seeing as well, given the nature of kind of in-person human interaction and how that helps things within movements. Any other reflections from Jiri, Federico, Philip?
If I may then?
Please.
I'm sorry. Maybe just a quick reminder that in Europe, since we like regulation that much, we have a new piece of regulation coming up very soon on artificial intelligence. And here it is not specifically looking at what kind of data you can use and how ethically you should be used around the data, because for that, of course, we have other rules like personal data protection regulation. But we will have quite precise rules on what your AI will be allowed to do and what it will not be allowed to do. So we will have a risk-based approach where you will have bad AI, okay, that will be only a minority, that presents unacceptable risk. And from our perspective, examples of such bad AI is social scoring of citizens, some untargeted scraping of data on citizens, and getting to some automated decisions without any human oversight. So this would be unacceptable risk. And then we would divide different AI applications into different categories depending on the risk that they present. If it's high risk, there will need to be some ex-ante conformity assessment with the rules. For example, where you recruit people based on AI analysis of data, or some use in medicine. Then some other kinds of AI will need to meet some transparency obligations so that people know how they work with their data. And lastly, there will be some AI that has really minimal risk, so it can operate without any restrictions or further transparency obligations. So this is what is coming up very soon. I think it will start to apply in 6 or 12 months time, so then we will see how it works. In the meantime, we can do a lot trying to make sure that the data is in good order, and it's a never-ending work. We contribute to it with some research into synthetic data, for example, because sometimes when you are not allowed to reuse some publicly available or even not available data that contains data on people, on identifiable persons, you can go around it by developing synthetic data with a similar characteristics. So this is an offering that is being developed quite a bit as well, as we have noticed. So it allows also for AI training within ethical and legal rules and respecting fundamental rights.
Thank you, Yuri. Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And Philip, would love to hear from you.
I think a couple of things. One is that I do not necessarily agree with the data wind. I think the data shows that, 90%, actually, I think 80% of the data that we have today was generated 2 years ago. Right, so it seems like there's, and it will double in the next 2 years, right? So it's not, I think it's not a question of a data wind or lack of data. I think we must accept that the complexity of our time has actually challenged how we understand data and data ecosystems. I think we really must accept that. And to the point then, how do we ensure then that we develop mechanisms that enable us to create a data governance framework that begins to understand the data? And so this is why, if you look at countries like mine, we are really pushing back against rushing to regulate and govern, because it's changing. As if it doubles in the next 2 years, then again, are we trying to regulate in a way that we're cutting up? So there has to be a realization that the world has changed. And even how we apply or how we understand governance within the current toolbox must also evolve with the changing times. That's why the multi-stakeholder, multi-level piece is really important, because then it's really about governing artificial intelligence, but also in a way that you sort of create guardrails. And when you understand it, then create the hard regulation. And so you see this push that we're talking about, of course, creating the larger principles for the guardrails, so ethics, accountability, responsibility, transparency, but at the same time ensuring that we're actually governing the data of humanity and to solve a lot of the problems that we're experiencing. I think for me, I really want to draw a line in that, especially for the global majority. We get the risk, we get the safety issues, we get the security issues. I always say, you give me a car, and then all you tell me is the brakes and the seatbelts. We need to move, right? So we are not averse to the safety issue. So let's talk about the entire car and figure out how that's going to solve climate, health, crisis, whatever. The second piece, of course, and this is what I always talk about, is the cost of misuse, right? So this is something we talk about in the body, right? Imagine the cost of not using this data for development decision making, and the cost of not using AI to respond to this sort of multiple and accelerating crisis. I mean, climate has accelerated. We just had the pandemic. We're having a recurring of flus. We're having new and emerging diseases. So there's a challenge there. So we always bring this. You ask whether I'm an optimist or not. For me, that's the side I want to say, right? Risk-based, but also fixed-based. The third piece, of course, is, and to Nadia's point, I think, yes, I get the hackathons piece. Maybe that's for the practitioners. But I think because we need to figure out how do we create new models that actually ensure that the citizens are aware of the risks and harms and the benefits of AI. They do not necessarily have to understand AI, but they need to understand the application and implication of artificial intelligence, whether it's misinformation, disinformation, fake news, deepfakes, right? So they just need to understand that. They don't need to understand what large language models are, what data computer is. And I think sometimes we just complicate these things. And so if we can move towards, the old age civic engagement, work with civil society, work with media, work with everybody, and so that people understand the harms. But also, this is how we build resiliency. And to my final point, this is how we begin to reclaim agency. Because what AI is doing is taking away human agency. And I think we need to ensure that everybody has agency in terms of making a choice on how they can use or not use artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Philip. I greatly appreciate so many of those thoughts, and the cost of misuse, the opportunity cost of not using these amazing tools and resources for answering, maybe, as Stefan said earlier, the right questions, or the questions that may add the most value, right? So thank you for underscoring so many important points, and also reminding us of where we are now compared to maybe 10 years ago, whether it's the amount of data that's been generated in such a short period of time, and the complexity of our times, as you mentioned. And in addition to the complexities of our times more broadly, there's the complexity of the real time with the clock, with just a few minutes left. And so I do want to thank our panelists. I know some of you have been responding to the Q&A directly. Thank you for that. I am going to give Federico our last word here of just a few minutes before handing things back to Stefan to close out our Open Data Policy Summit. And so, Federico, eager for your words of wisdom to close out our public sector panel here.
Thank you, Adrian. Just to say that among the National Statistical Systems institutions, actually, I'm still registered with the NSA, or with us. Data is primarily collected for administrative purposes. And then is shared with the NSO to reuse it for statistical purposes. But it is not a widely practice in other NSOs. At the NSA of Uruguay, we have implemented a statistical data warehouse system that integrates several administrative registers from different data sources, different institutions, mainly from public sector, on population, businesses, and dwellings. And we are trying to access to privately held data, but it hasn't been so easy. During the first panel, Francisco from Telefonica spoke about the use of cell phone data. In Uruguay, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we accessed to mobile data from MNOs, and to measure the population mobility during the period when minimizing mobility was recommended. In Uruguay, mobility was not restricted but recommended, but it was within the framework of the presidential health emergency decree. Once the decree became void, we couldn't access to this data anymore, and we started a new negotiation with the MNOs, with the telco. We also involved the regulator, and so far we are trying to access this data again, and we have been thinking in different incentives for the data providers, etc. They argue that with this, publishing this kind of information on population mobility, we are going to destroy their business of selling data service, and since then we are trying to develop a win-win collaborative agreement, but it is complicated. I believe that at the end of the day, this is going to end up in a regulation, in some legal framework that forces them to share the data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Federico, for sharing those insights and your lived experience of being within your office, and how all of this translates on the ground. And with that, I believe Stefan is coming back to close us out. I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists for the discussion over the last hour, for taking the time out of your day, and also to our audience for your thoughtful questions in the chat. Thank you.